The first day of 2002 NBA free agency is finally here, and it is going to go down as one of the most memorable 24 or stretches of 24 hours in Grizzlies history. The awesome, the good, and a little bit of bad news as well. Shawn Coleman, Damichael Cole back together for the first time in a while. When it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies, there's plenty to discuss here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.
Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. My co-host, Damichael Cole, is with me. And if you've been wondering where I've been over the past 2 episodes, Damichael just simply didn't tell me he was recording. That's exactly what occurred. He just decided to do it on his own. Finally, our schedules met up to allow for us to talk about NBA free agency. Of course, I'm kidding. It's always a pleasure to be with Damichael. Damichael, how are you, sir?
Shawn, I'm great, but how about this first day of free agency? I mean, Shawn, I knew the fireworks were going to start popping, but they didn't stop.
Exactly. And if you, it's different covering a team than it is being someone who just, casually, follows the team like I've done in the past. When you turn those notifications on, there's a lot of things popping. You've got big deals, you've got small deals, you've got what have you. I'm not necessarily saying any team has really seen its fortunes change as of yet, though you've seen some notable players change teams, but there's plenty of things going on. And for those of us who are Memphis Grizzlies fans and cover the team, it's been an exciting day as well for some good and some not so good reasons. Of course, you can find me at StatsSAC, Damichael at Damichael C, the show at Locked On Grizz, right here on YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button below. Also free on all podcast platforms. So, Damichael, let's get to the big news. It just popped from Twitter after the recording. The biggest news of all, perhaps the singular most important tweet in Grizzlies franchise history, and I'm not exaggerating this, it absolutely is. Franchise cornerstone Ja Morant has agreed to what many expected to happen, a 5-year, $193 million rookie level extension. Obviously getting plenty of dough, an average of nearly $40 million per year. And while it was expected, it was absolutely surreal to see. But in other words, Damichael Cole, the Grizzlies have locked in a superstar to be the main man in Memphis for the foreseeable future. How does it make you feel?
Shawn, we expected this, right? But when you see it, when you actually see 5 years, $193 million, and potentially $231 million committed to Ja Morant for the foreseeable future, I mean, that's trust within the Grizzlies. That's hard work being rewarded. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, it's good to see, young guy, from, small part of South Carolina who wasn't a highly rated recruit, worked his way up, became this, top draft pick, and has exceeded even that hype and earned this contract. It's great to see that, for one, how he's transformed Memphis Grizzlies basketball just in 3 seasons. All of that is great to see, and it's well-deserved. But, Shawn, I mean, just to see it, actually happen. 5 years, the max extension, for a rookie, the largest contract in Grizzlies franchise history. So Mike Conley can now take a back seat to what was at one time, Shawn. If you remember, Mike Conley signed the largest contract in NBA history. At the time it was signed, 5 years, $153 million. Now Ja Morant at 5 years, $193 million, a full $40 million than Mike Conley's contract just 6 years ago. Tells you how much the NBA changes on a per year basis. But this is a huge deal, Shawn. The Grizzlies have their guy. Every team has their guy who, puts people in the seats and things like that. The Grizzlies have their guy in Ja Morant.
And the thing about it is that this is not a situation, like the De'Aaron Fox situation is when it comes to Sacramento, who you've got a very good player that has been someone that a franchise hasn't had in a while, so they want to max him out, even though he may not necessarily be a max player. Ja Morant legitimately jumped into being deserving, without a shadow of a doubt, of that type of contract, to the level that Luka, to the level that Trey and others have gotten their, paydays as well. But the other big thing that stands out to me is that the thing is that this could have just been business, right, for Ja Morant. This could have just been something that, happened quietly, that was expected, not a lot of fanfare. But the whole thing that makes this even more exciting is that throughout the whole process, Ja Morant has gone out of his way to make it clear he is made for Memphis and wants to be here. Memphis is my home, was the second tweet that he sent after signing this deal. I think that's significant, and I don't think it's just for a show. Ja Morant knows that because of the franchise he's with, that's a big reason why he's been able to have the success he's had early in his career, and it's great to see the love that the city and the franchise has for him. It's very much reciprocated from him back to the fans and the city and the team.
Man, it's special, Shawn. It's special. As someone who was growing up in Memphis, my entire life. I mean, it's crazy. It's almost funny. Like I literally talk to people almost every day, and you hear people always tell me that, man, I forget sometimes that Ja Morant isn't from Memphis. That's a legit thing. Like there is a difference sometimes, when a star player kind of accumulates himself to a city and, hey, he's not from here, but he is loved here. Ja Morant feels like he's from Memphis, the things he loved, with it, whether it's music, whether the way he dresses, the way he talks, his confidence, his swagger, it all feels Memphis, and he fits, he's like that last piece of the puzzle. It just fits. He fits perfectly, in Memphis. He said Memphis is his home. I had the one-on-one with him the other day at Halley, and we were just talking about that. Just he talked about how Memphis has, taken his family in, and they just feel so at home, here. And then there was the talk in the past, where I've talked to his parents, particularly his father, about, they preferred coming to a city like Memphis than a New York, who had the number 3 pick, in that same draft that season, because they wanted to be in a city that almost was a bigger city, but small in a way that kind of reminded them of home, and they feel that love in Memphis. So it's great to see that he's really, enjoying being in Memphis, because, a lot of times when players go to those so-called small markets, and I put quotes around that because Zach Kleiman basically told us there's nothing small market about the way that the Grizzlies are going to spend their money. We'll get to that more going forward. But I think this is a great situation for Ja. It's a great situation for the Grizzlies. It's a great situation all around, and it's a time of celebration. It's a time of celebration right now, Shawn.
But the thing is, it's also a time, it absolutely is a time of celebration. Congrats to Ja Morant, who is more than deserving of this type of payday, but it also is a sign of evolution, a sign of transition. This is truly a step to the next phase of the Memphis Grizzlies, Damichael, where they are committing to their core. They've committed to Jaren. They're hopefully going to commit to perhaps Brandon Clark, Desmond Bane in the future, but they've committed to the face of the franchise and Ja Morant. They know where they are hitching their wagon, where they are really focused on putting the emphasis on. These are the players we feel are rightfully going to be a part of our championship core. Yes, it was expected. Yes, this is not a surprise to anyone, but I think it's still relevant that we've now moved into a new era. He's not going to be paid starting this year, but it'll be paid starting in 2023, 2024. It's great to see, but it's also a realization, hey, this is a new era. Expectations are about to go up. It's going to be fun, but things are also going to be a lot higher. Stakes are going to be a lot higher moving forward.
Yeah, stakes are going to be a lot higher. I mentioned it with Jaren Jackson Jr. Last season, right? The honeymoon phase is now going to be over. So a lot of the things that people come to expect, for example, Ja, he played 58 games and whatnot. Oh, When you're paying a guy potentially $231 million, we're talking, that's a lot of money being committed to one player. So they're going to expect Ja to play. They're going to expect great performances. And, it's that comes with the money. The honeymoon phase is going to be over. Right now, I think we're still in the stage of, wow, Memphis has never had anything like this. That's always going to be the case. But over the course of time, the expectations are going to rise. We saw this team go to the second round. I think everyone wants more next season, even though the West will be even more competitive. But still, the goals and the expectations. Ja Morant told me the goal is nothing short of a ring. They want to win a ring next season. So, it's a great time, to be in Memphis.
Absolutely. So then that begs the question. The Grizzlies just committed nearly $200 million. And after this next year, nearly $40 million per to their franchise cornerstone, who's a point guard. Why would they then want to commit $15 million per to their backup point guard? Oh, well, that's because they want to get the most value out of the Ja Morant extension. We'll discuss that in just a moment. First off, though, before we get into anything about Tyus Jones, about Jaren Jackson Jr., about Ja Morant, and how exciting it is to know that he is going to be in Memphis long term. The first thing that we need to talk with you about when it comes to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast is Arcade One Up. And the reason why that is because I know that we don't get to see this that often now, but think about how exciting Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson Jr. would be when it comes to NBA Jam. Well, NBA Jam is back. Arcade One Up, the leader at in-home retro arcade games, is not only bringing the best game back ever, but they made it bigger than ever with a, wait for it, Shaq Edition style game. People are obsessed with NBA Jam, and I'm thrilled to tell you, our listeners, that you can once again play hoops with NBA legends. Jump clear across the court and set the ball on fire. And one of the first sports games ever to feature real and digitized NBA licensed teams. No fouls, no free throws, no quarters required. Compete with friends and family through all new Wi-Fi leaderboards, making you more connected than ever. Pre-order now from arcade1.com, arcade1up.com. That's arcade, the number one up.com for an estimated early September ship date. Arcade One Up is the place for fun. They've got even more classics like Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat, and many others starting at $399. And check this out. They're giving away an NBA Jam Shaq Edition to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/locked on. Woo! That's a lot to read after the excitement of discussing Ja Morant. Listen, we want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. We've got plenty to discuss in our initial reaction to some big news for the Grizzlies. We're going to break it all down for you going for the rest of this week, going into next week, and especially leading up to the Summer League starting, where the Grizzlies and their fans are going to get to see the new rookies in action. Make sure you check out the latest content here at Locked On Grizzlies. So, Ja Morant may have been the most significant long-term signing of the day. But the day started off with one of the biggest questions of the Grizzlies offseason being answered to Michael Cole, and that was Tyus Jones agreeing to a 2-year, $30 million deal. Now, I have a top reason as to why I think it makes big sense for the Grizzlies to have made this commitment, but I want to get your thoughts on the contract and just why it was a no-brainer for the Grizzlies to bring Tyus Jones back.
Yeah, Shawn, we spent so much time talking about this and would it be able to happen and things like that. But one thing that I don't think either of us questioned, because the words came out of Zach Kleiman's own mouth. He said, the Grizzlies, throw all this small market, we talked about this, throw all the small market stuff out of the window. The Grizzlies aren't going to be able to spend like this, small market. Throw all of that out the window. Robert Parrish is one of the richest owners in the NBA. From what Zach Kleiman has told us, the Grizzlies have his full support, and they aren't going to have any problems committing money to retain players that they value. Clearly, they value Tyus Jones, and as we see, money wasn't a problem. This makes him one of the 3 highest paid backup point guards in the NBA, and in my mind, he's the highest paid backup point guard. I'm going to tell you why, because the other 2 guys are Eric Bledsoe and Derek White. Both of those guys were starters when they signed those deals. So again, Derek White, he signed that deal in San Antonio. He was a starter. Eric Bledsoe, I believe he signed that deal when he was with the Milwaukee Bucks. He was a starter, or he was with the Pelicans. One of those things. But when Eric Bledsoe signed that deal, he was a starter. With that being said, Tyus Jones is just inked $15 million a year, known as a backup, and he's going to be a backup. So, I mean, the Grizzlies said they're going to commit money to guys they want to retain. Who cares if he's playing 21, 22 minutes a game? If they want to pay him the big bucks, they're going to pay him. He's going to almost be making $1 million per minute. It feels like $15 million per game. He's making $15 million. He's probably going to play somewhere around 20 minutes per game. Shawn, that's a big deal.
Absolutely. And so it goes back to the point that I'm making now. So next year, Tyus Jones actually is going to be making more than Ja Morant the first year of his contract, which is fine. But then in that 2023-2024 season, Damichael, between Ja Morant and Tyus Jones, you're going to have $60 million committed to your backcourt. And do you want to know why, in my opinion, Tyus Jones is worth every dollar? And do you want to know why, in my opinion, it made sense for the Grizzlies to draft Kennedy Chandler, to put layers of support in place for Ja Morant? Here's the reason why. Ja Morant's not getting paid $193 million to set Grizzlies scoring records for the month of December and the month of January. Ja Morant's getting paid $193 million so that he can be the difference maker the Grizzlies know that he can be, and we know that he had a chance to be in the playoffs, leading the Grizzlies to championship pursuits. The whole purpose of signing Tyus Jones to the contract that the Grizzlies did was to give them the best chance of giving Ja Morant an opportunity to stay as fresh as possible to where he will be at his best entering the playoffs, and the Grizzlies could have 45-plus minutes each night of Tyus Jones or Ja Morant running the offense. The investment in Tyus Jones is investment in a reliable opportunity for the Grizzlies to manage the time Ja Morant plays during the regular season so that he could be at his best in the postseason. You've got a reliable option that you know at times you can play with Ja, but you're investing in a reliable option so that you can keep Ja Morant at the best that he can be as many times as possible, especially in the playoffs. So number-wise, it may not necessarily make that sense, but when you really get down to when you want Ja to be at his best, it makes perfect sense to me.
Makes perfect sense, Shawn. And then another part of this that makes perfect sense as well is the length of the deal. That was one of my biggest questions. I didn't see Tyus Jones taking a 2-year deal. I figured his next contract would be 4 years, even if it was less annual value. You know, if he was offered 4 years, $44 million or something like that, I felt like maybe that was something that would be a little more enticing or things like that. But at the end of the day, he took a lot. You know, he got $15 million per year over 2 years. I think that's a perfect case scenario for the Grizzlies. One, Kennedy Chandler. Now you're talking 2 years. If Kennedy Chandler is really good, you know, after his rookie year and you feel like he can take that Desmond Bane jump, well, you know what you do? Just like you did with Grayson Allen, you say, hey, you know, he has 1 year. He has 1 year left on his contract. Tyus Jones, being as good as a point guard as he is, that contract will be movable if he plays anywhere near he has last season. So that'll be a good trade chip potentially if, you know, it comes to that. And that only is if Kennedy Chandler, you know, has a really good rookie year where you feel comfortable in making that transition. Also, if you play him 2 seasons like we expect, if Tyus Jones is the primary backup for the next 2 seasons, once his contract comes off the books, Desmond Bane's extension, it'll be time to extend Desmond Bane, and it'll kick in. So next summer, Desmond Bane will probably get his extension as well. Ja Morant's extension will kick in. And then that next year, Desmond Bane's extension will kick in. So once Desmond Bane's extension kicks in, Tyus Jones' big $15 million per year contract will be off the books. We talked a lot about it, Shawn. It's going to be hard to pay all of these guys, especially when you talk about the reserves, paying a reserve $15 million a year. That's really tough when you have Ja Morant's contract, when you're going to have Desmond Bane's contract, who's probably going to get paid more than Jaren Jackson Jr. if he, you know, plays at this level again next season. And that's 3 big contracts right there that you're going to have to manage. And it's going to be hard to pay guys like they're paying Tyus right now. They're more than capable of doing so. But with all that being said, I think, the length lines up perfectly in terms of 2 years. It gives you a chance to, see what you're going to do with Desmond Bain, how you're going to work Tyus Jones' future flexibility, plus the Kennedy Chandler situation. All of that factored into this, and it's a perfect win for the Grizzlies.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, again, you've got reliable options. Tyus Jones shooting as well allows for him to have multiple ways in which he can add value. So it's a great signing for the Grizzlies. And even if you think $15 million may be a bit too much, the whole point is that, again, in the first year, it's more than worth it because of the fact that you've still got Ja and Desmond Bain on their rookie deals. But of course, great day when it comes to the Grizzlies maintaining arguably the top 1-2 punch of point guards in the NBA. But there was a bit of negative news on a few fronts when it comes to the Grizzlies, especially when it comes to the injury news of Jaren Jackson Jr. Me and Damichael will discuss that in just a moment. But before we do, I want to talk with you about Sakara. Now, the thing about Sakara is this. We all want to eat healthy. Feeling your best starts with what you eat. Sakara helps you live a healthy, balanced lifestyle and truly enjoy it with delicious, plant-rich, transformational nutrition that builds a foundation for living in your best body. Now is the time to seek wellness, joy, and abundance in all areas of your life, starting with what you eat. With Sakara, you get nutrient-dense meals, snacks, and supplements that nourish your body without ever sacrificing taste or quality. Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine, on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. And right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off their first order when they go to sakara.com/locked-on20 or enter locked-on20 at checkout. That's Sakara, SARKARA.com/locked-on to get 20% off your first order. Sakara.com/locked-on. Listen, for the rest of this week and going into next week, we're going to have plenty of things to talk about, breaking down all the happenings from the Grizzlies free agency. Plus, Damichael Cole will be live from the Summer League. As a matter of fact, Damichael Cole is going to interrupt one of the Grizzlies Summer League games during the first quarter for us to record a live segment of Locked On Grizzlies. That's not true at all. But the only way that you can verify whether it's true or not is to tune into Locked On Grizzlies next week. A lot of fun coming up. We'll make sure to have you covered with all the great content coming from Locked On Grizzlies. So all the excitement is there. It's great that Ja Morant's going to be here for a long period of time. But unfortunately, there was some unexpected news that came down the pipe when it came to the Grizzlies today. And that was the fact that it was reported Jaren Jackson Jr. had surgery, successful surgery, mind you, on, I believe it was his right foot. He had a stress fracture in his right foot. Typically I'm not a medical expert. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm one. Typically, this is something that builds up over time, something that developed. The Grizzlies wanted to make sure that, it got taken care of. But 4 to 6 months is the recovery time. And though he's expected to make a full recovery, for a few reasons, Damichael, it's great to hear that he's going to make a full recovery, but this takes away a needed offseason of development for Jaren. And it's the second major, leg injury that he's had to deal with. There's some concern with this, I feel, even with the full recovery expected.
Yeah, there's real concern. Personally, my approach is a little bit different with it, Shawn. I'm not as much concerned about his personal health. I think he'll make. He's a great athlete. I think he'll make a full recovery. 4 to 6 months. The Grizzlies will take their time. We've seen Jaren Jackson Jr. When he had the meniscus injury, everyone was wondering, wow, what's taking him so long to get back, right? But he talked about how he wanted to take his time throughout that. And he had to be patient. I think he has the maturity. He has the people around him. He has a father who played in the NBA. So he has the understanding of taking his time to get through these type things. But I'm looking at it from a different angle. And it's we talked, in the exit interviews, a lot of the conversation was about how this summer could unlock another level of Ja and Jaren playing together. Now, I think we're just going to be back at square one, Shawn. And when I say square one, I mean he's not going to be ready at the beginning of the season. So what's going to happen is he's going to be incorporated in the season. And those minutes in the preseason when you're running all your sets and practices and things like that, those are invaluable minutes. As we know, when the regular season starts, I mean, NBA players will tell you themselves, there's not a lot of just straight practices. There's game prep stuff. There's morning shoot around. There's some little quick things that you do throughout over the course of a season. But the work that you get in preseason, in training camp and in preseason games and things like that, that's invaluable. And now Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. have been robbed of that again. And we're going to have to see, what the adjustment is like with those two playing together. And I think that's going to, I think we could possibly be asking the same question next offseason about the Ja and Jaren pairing, like playing well on the court at the same time, because we're not going to get it until possibly December, January. And at that point, you're in the regular season. Ja's going to be full bore more than likely at that point, and Jaren Jackson is just going to come in. He's probably going to be incorporated kind of how he was with the meniscus injury, come off the bench some or slowly work his way in. And this offseason was a big part of it was unlocking Ja and Jaren. We saw Jaren Jackson Jr. among all the Grizzlies players. He had the biggest list from Taylor Jenkins. Big list of things to work on throughout the course of the offseason. If some of those things were mental, possibly he'll still be able to work on them, but I'm sure a lot of those physical things, he'll be limited at this point. So it's a big deal. It's a real big deal. I'm not gonna underplay it, but like I said, I expect him to make a full recovery. He'll be back. He'll be back for when it matters the most. But that was definitely the tough news of the day, Shawn.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I'm going to be honest with you, is that Jaren Jackson Jr., yes, he had his first full complete season last year, but you see the end result of it. It's not the most encouraging track record for a player that's still 22. You go back to his rookie year, it ended because of a knee bruise. You go back to his sophomore year, it ended because of the meniscus injury that basically took away his entire third year. And now, though he's played it was wonderful last year, especially defensively, now it's led to another serious injury. So, when you deal, even with as athletic as Jaren Jackson Jr. is, when you deal with the type of skill set that he has at his size, I do feel that there is a bit more, injury risk there potentially, especially when it comes to lower body injuries. And we're seeing that with Jaren. You certainly are glad to hear the full recovery is expected, but you hope that, there's this doesn't continue to be a trend over time. And the other thing that stands out from today, Damichael, is so with Jaren potentially not being available, let's be honest, for the first third at least of the season next year, that kind of shines the spotlight on the Grizzlies front court. Do they have really the need to now try to use, Xavier Tillman to go out and get another backcourt piece in a trade? Probably not. Does this put an extra emphasis on extending Brandon Clark potentially? I believe so. Does this mean that Steven Adams probably is not going to be traded? I believe so. But another key thing that happened today, a reliable front court piece for the Grizzlies over the past 4 years is now Minnesota Timberwolves, and his name is Kyle Anderson, a 2-year, $18 million deal. So I'm not saying that the Grizzlies are going to be a reactive team and they're going to go make some type of significant move to get them more front court depth. But the whole point is that with Jaren being injured, you see the reason for the Grizzlies to invest in what they have, and that could lead to some decisions about the futures of Brandon Clark and Steven Adams this offseason as well.
Shawn, I think a lot of people took Kyle Anderson for granted. That's what I think. Over the course of the offseason, we've seen all the, and well-deserved love for Tyus Jones needing to be resigned. But how soon do people forget Kyle Anderson? He stepped up big in that Golden State series, and he has some of the best hands. I think now with DeAnthony Melton being traded, I was saying that he had the best defensive hands on the team in terms of, you talk about the Grizzlies, deflection, steals, blocks. He had the best hands on the team for those situations. And, great defender, great veteran. You talk about the shooting and things like that, yes, but overall, this is a guy who is an important piece. And we talk about those guys who can defend wings. They don't grow on trees. He's one of those guys. Now he goes to not only a different team, but he goes to Minnesota, a team you just played in the playoffs. And you're going to see a lot more over the course of the next few years. It's a tough loss. But, Shawn, I'm going to tell you really why it's a tough loss. because you just mentioned it. Jaren Jackson Jr. He's going to be out beginning of the season. Who's going to play power forward? Because in the past, you just slide Kyle Anderson in there with no problem. Don't think twice about it. But now I think you have a real hole. And when I say hole, yes, the Grizzlies have bodies on the roster who can fill that spot. But with Kyle Anderson filling in for Jaren Jackson Jr. at times, you knew, that the Grizzlies could at least stay, if they were a 2 seed, they would play to the level of a fifth or sixth seed. They wouldn't fall too far, with that being said. But now you're talking about your options being David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, Xavier Tillman, as Shawn just mentioned, Santi Aldama. None of these guys have been proven producers. We're talking to the level of Kyle Anderson in their careers. So I think this actually puts the pressure on the Grizzlies to add another wing. But the Grizzlies might have thought, hey, we just want to re-sign Tyus, and we're fine with how our roster construction is made up. But the Jaren Jackson Jr. Injury really puts them in a bind. It's a tough spot. But Kyle Anderson was a big deal. I think people really took him for granted. But Shawn, who's going to play that spot now? We're going to talk more about that in future episodes, but I think that's a big deal because Kyle Anderson, in the past, he fills in a hurry, and, the Grizzlies don't skip a beat.
Absolutely, but I think you hit the nail on the head. With Kyle Anderson being gone, with Jaren Jackson Jr., even if it may not seem ideal, the Grizzlies' young talents, their young depth, they're once again going to have the chance to shine through. And that's worked in the past. We'll see if it works again. But it's going to be the other really interesting thing to take away from all this, Damichael. You've lost Melton. You've lost Kyle Anderson. Those were two big reasons why the Grizzlies were so good when it came to creating turnovers in defense. And now you've lost Jaren Jackson Jr. as well. The Grizzlies arguably being the best defensive playmaking team in the league. That's a hard argument to make now. That's a potential part of your identity gone. It'll be interesting to see how the Grizzlies make up for it. But for Damichael Cole, my name's Shawn Coleman. We want to give our instant reaction. We've done exactly that. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be with you again soon. Hope you have a great 4th of July weekend. Wherever you are and wherever you are listening, we're going to make sure to keep you posted and break down any happenings that occur along the way. For Damichael Cole, my name's Shawn Coleman. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.